The cold wind from Puget Sound howled through the drizzle as two guns pointed at a middle-aged man pumping gas. Hands on the car now. The sharp command cut through the pale light of the Northgate Fuel Mart. Diego Morales froze his hand, gripping the nozzle, the bitter smell of fuel filling the air. He turned his head and saw two young officers, Carter Hale and Owen Pierce, moving toward him, tense and wary. Minutes earlier, everything had been calm. After 2 long days at the University of Washington Medical Center, where his mother had just undergone heart surgery, Diego only wanted a hot shower and quiet. In his worn jeans, dark hoodie, and old sneakers, he looked like any working man. No one could guess that under the wet fabric stood a king county judge who had sentenced criminals and lectured on constitutional law. But tonight all that authority meant nothing in the face of bias. "What are you doing here?" Carter asked, his hand on his gun. "Getting gas," Diego replied evenly. "This station's public." "Not many people stop here this late," Carter said. "Report of a suspect nearby, male, dark skin, wearing a hoodie." Diego raised an eyebrow. "That describes half of Seattle." Carter didn't respond. He stepped closer while Pierce circled the car. Diego knew this scene he'd heard it described countless times in court. Only this time he was the one facing the barrel. He spoke slowly, loud enough for the body cams. "I'm reaching for my wallet. It has my court ID." "Keep your hands still," Carter snapped. "Court ID, sure. Fake lawyer." Before Diego could answer, a rough shove slammed him against the freezing hood. The cuffs clicked shut. From across the lot, a phone camera recorded everything. "You're making a mistake," Diego said through clenched teeth. "We hear that every day," Pierce sneered. "Everyone's innocent when they're caught. Do you even know who I am? Doesn't matter." "Right now, I'm the law," Diego whispered. "No, you're just the one enforcing it." They didn't listen. Rain poured harder, mixing with gasoline and humiliation. In the patrol car, his face pressed to the cold glass red lights, flickering in his reflection. In minutes, a judge's dignity was gone. Only a soaked, silent man in chains remained. At the edge of the station, manager Arun Patel trembled with his phone. He knew that man, the one who bought coffee every morning. He called Lynn Tran, Diego's colleague. That call would set the city on fire. As the car crossed Aurora Bridge, Diego stared at his reflection. Anger, not fear, filled him. His mother's words echoed, "Justice exists only when those in power dare to face it." For the first time, he understood. Tonight he'd seen the system's dark side. At the Shoreline precinct, Carter turned off the siren, laughing. "Another victim of society? Huh." Diego's voice was calm. "Tomorrow you'll see me again. Where the law truly begins." Carter didn't care, but he would the next morning when he entered the courtroom and saw the man he had cuffed in the rain sitting on the bench, Judge Diego Morales. Outside, Seattle's rain fell soft and endless, like the quiet resolve forming inside him. He closed his eyes, letting anger become focus. Tonight he had lost his faith, but by morning he would reclaim justice. Not just for himself, but for everyone who had never been allowed to see it. The cold white lights of the Shoreline precinct washed the room in a sterile, hospital gray hue. The heavy clang of the iron door echoed like a sentence. Diego Morales was shoved inside his wrists, still cuffed the air, thick with bleach and stale coffee. Officer Carter Hale tossed a stack of papers onto the table. "Name, you already have it," Diego said calmly. "I told you 3 times on the way here." Pierce smirked. "You sound comfortable talking to cops." "Been here." Before Diego lifted his head, his calm stare silencing them for a second. He said nothing more. In his mind, he replayed the rules of a lawful arrest. He knew how many they'd broken. But arguing now would only dig him deeper. Behind the counter, a heavy-set sergeant with gray hair didn't look up. Name Diego Morales. Date of birth, July 2nd, 1976. Reason for arrest. Maybe these officers can explain, Diego replied. Carter jumped in defensive. Suspicion of theft. He matches the description. Any evidence we have the right to detain him, Carter snapped. The sergeant scribbled notes without care. In this room, cuffed men were just case numbers. When Pierce removed the cuffs, red marks lined Diego's wrists. He rubbed them lightly, steadying his breath. I'd like to make a phone call, he said. After we log your belongings, the sergeant replied, pointing to a metal tray. Wallet, phone, belt, shoes. Diego obeyed, placing each item down carefully. When the sergeant opened the wallet, the light glinted on a King County Court ID. He frowned. What's this? It's real, Diego said evenly. I'm a judge with King County. Carter laughed. Sure you are. Last week a guy told me he was an astronaut. Diego met his gaze. And when this is confirmed, how will you explain it? Pierce chuckled. Confirm all you want. Nobody at the court's backing a guy arrested in the rain. The door opened. A young female officer entered her nameplate, reading S. Nguyen. She froze when she saw Diego. Sergeant, this man. What is it, Nguyen? He taught at the police academy last year. I was in his class. Judge Morales lectured on civil rights and proper arrest procedure. The room went still. Carter and Pierce turned pale. The sergeant's tone shifted. You're sure positive, Sophia said firmly. And by what he taught, the way these officers acted tonight broke at least 4 core rules of the law. Carter flushed red. The sergeant picked up the phone, calling upstairs. Diego spoke quietly, his tone composed. I'm not asking for privilege, only that the law be followed. The sergeant nodded stiffly. Please wait while we verify your identity. And I still request my phone call, Diego added. That's my constitutional right. Sophia's eyes held both shame and respect. She was seeing something rare, a man of power staying calm while humiliated. Minutes later, the door opened and Captain William Kerr entered in a gray suit, his face grim. He glanced at the badge on the table, then at Diego. Judge Morales, I'm deeply sorry. This seems to be a grave misunderstanding. Diego's voice was sharp and cold. No, Captain. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a civil rights violation, and tomorrow I'll make sure it's handled by the law. Kerr swallowed hard and turned to Carter and Pierce. My office. Now. The door shut, his angry voice muffled behind it. Only Diego, Sophia, and the silent sergeant remained. I'm sorry, sir, Sophia whispered. Diego offered a faint smile. Don't apologize for the system. Help change it. When he stepped outside, rain fell harder, streetlights flickering on the wet pavement. His phone, freshly returned, buzzed non-stop. The video from the gas station had gone viral. The headline read, Judge arrested for looking suspicious footage, sparks outrage. Diego stood still, staring at the flashing red lights behind him. In that moment, he knew tomorrow wouldn't be routine. It would be the day justice was forced to look itself in the mirror. The Morales home on the hill above Green Lake was still lit, though it was nearly midnight. When Diego stepped inside, the scent of ginger and lemon lingered from the kitchen, but it couldn't soften the tension in the air. Camilla, still in her work clothes, stood with her phone in hand, the viral video playing on the screen, a man handcuffed in the rain pressed against a car hood. Her husband. You didn't answer? She said, her voice trembling with anger and disbelief. The whole city's seen this. Do you realize what they did to you? Diego hung up his wet coat, calm but heavy-eyed. I do. And I know there are countless others like me, only difference is no one filmed them. Mateo, 17, stood on the stairs, fists clenched. If they can do this to you, what chance do we have? You told me to stay calm, to say yes, sir. But does it even matter? Diego looked at him, pain flickering beneath composure. That's why we have to make it matter. So one day, you won't have to learn to survive. You'll just get to live. Isabella, 14, came from the living room, clutching her tablet, eyes swollen. Mom cried watching that video. Why do they hate you just for looking different? Diego knelt and hugged her. Not everyone hates Sweetie, but some are taught to fear faces like mine. They don't see it's wrong until they have to pay for it. Camila put her phone down. I spoke to the ACLU. They're ready to back a lawsuit. This could change everything. I'm not suing, Diego said softly. Not yet. If I act like a victim, they'll reduce this to another scandal. But if I handle it as a judge, it'll become precedent. Camila studied him, torn between fear and faith. What are you planning? Diego opened his laptop, the screen's glow revealing faint red marks on his wrists. Tomorrow I'll substitute for Judge Lynn Tran in the Abington Township misconduct hearing. The original judge is ill, and the two officers listed Camila froze. Carter Hale and Owen Pierce. He nodded. Quite the coincidence. Mateo gripped the railing. You're going to judge them? Isn't that revenge? No, Diego said firmly. It's justice. I'll do what they never did, treat them fairly. An email popped up from Judge Lynn Tran. Be careful. Media everywhere. You're walking into fire. Diego exhaled, leaning back. Then someone has to walk through it to bring light. Camila placed her hand over his. This could destroy your career or restore faith in justice, he replied. Isabella dabbed his bruised wrist with a towel. Does it hurt, Dad? Only if I let it. Otherwise, it reminds me why I do this. Mateo's voice wavered. They'll try to turn this against you again? Maybe, Diego said. But this time, the world's watching. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sound of dripping water filled the silence. Camila turned on the TV. The screen showed reporters outside the precinct headlines, scrolling racial profiling scandal Judge Morales identified as victim. Interviews played, analysts debated, and a clip of Diego's old lecture resurfaced. Justice doesn't live in the text of the law, it lives in how we treat those with less power. Camila turned to him. Then show them that justice. He closed his laptop and stood. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Courtroom 4B. They'll see it through action, not words. The house was quiet except for the hum of the lake's reflection glimmering on the ceiling like embers. Diego walked to the window, gazing into the black water, his reflection both fragile and unyielding. Somewhere in the city, two officers slept soundly, unaware that by morning, the man they'd handcuffed in the rain would sit above them on the bench and ask the question, justice never stops asking. Why? The early morning sky over Seattle was shrouded in mist, the pale sunlight glinting faintly on the stone steps of the King County Courthouse. Crowds had gathered outside cameras and signs bearing the words, Justice for All filling the square. Overnight, the story of the wrongfully arrested judge had swept across the nation. It was no longer an incident, it had become a symbol in America's reckoning with justice and race. Diego Morales stepped out of a black sedan dressed in a gray suit and burgundy tie. Each step felt deliberate. measured as though he had left his exhaustion behind. Inside the courthouse, the air grew still. Guards, clerks, and staff stood respectfully, their eyes filled with both admiration and unease. "Good morning, Judge Morales," said the elderly guard Henderson quietly. "It's an honor to see you still standing." Diego's tone was calm but firm. If justice can be broken that easily, Henderson, it was never justice. Outside courtroom 4B, reporters crowded around. Officer Sofia Nguyen stood with court security watching him pass. Their eyes met briefly, and she remembered his words that night. Don't apologize for the system. Help change it. The courtroom fell silent as the doors opened. At the plaintiff's table sat Andre Collins, 24, his face tense but resolute. Across from him, Officers Carter Hale and Owen Pierce sat stiffly in uniform, their confidence clearly shaken. Their attorney, Maxwell Gordon, a stout man with gold-rimmed glasses, stood ready, a veteran at defending police misconduct. "The King County Court is now in session," the clerk announced. "Case of Andre Collins versus the Abington Police Department for abuse of power and excessive force. Presiding judge, the Honorable Diego Morales." Murmurs spread across the room. Carter's face turned pale as he realized the man they had handcuffed was now the one presiding over their case. Diego straightened his files, his gaze unwavering. "I understand my presence may raise doubts about impartiality." He began, his voice steady. "But I will judge by evidence, not emotion. Justice is not bound by the past, it is measured by truth in the present." Gordon rose, voice loud and confident. "Your Honor, my clients have the right to request recusal. Given your prior encounter with them, the public may question your neutrality. The law states that if a judge's impartiality can reasonably be questioned, recusal is warranted." The air in the courtroom tightened. Diego nodded slowly, placed his pen down, and spoke evenly. "Mr. Gordon, I understand. But let me ask you this: if those who have experienced injustice are barred from seeking justice, then who will deliver it? Those who have never seen it, never felt it. Blindness in justice doesn't mean ignorance. It means fairness. I am not blind to reality, but I am fair to truth." The tapping of the stenographer's keys echoed in the stillness. Gordon hesitated, then sat down without a word. Diego turned to the plaintiff. "Mr. Collins, you may proceed." Andre rose, voice trembling slightly. "Your Honor, I just want to be treated like a human being. I'm not against the police. I just want to know why I was treated like a criminal when I did nothing wrong." Around the courtroom, people bowed their heads. An elderly black woman whispered a prayer. Law students scribbled notes as if capturing history. Outside the tall windows, the crowd remained hundreds, holding signs reading "Equal Protection under the law." Diego's voice broke the silence. "The court will now hear testimony and evidence. Remember, justice does not favor the powerful or the powerless, it favors the truth. Those who hide it today will face it tomorrow." The heavy doors closed, muffling the noise outside. Diego raised his gavel and struck it once. The echo was sharp, signaling not just the start of a trial, but a confrontation between power and principle. Carter Hale lowered his head, sweat gathering on his brow. He tried to breathe, but Diego's voice from that night replayed in his mind. "Tomorrow you'll see me, where the law truly begins." And now that tomorrow had come, the law stood before him, no longer a word, but a man. The air in the courtroom was thick enough to touch. Late morning light streamed through the tall windows, glinting off the wooden table where Judge Diego Morales turned the pages of a file, with calm precision. His voice cut through the silence, deep and measured. The court will begin with the statement of the plaintiff, Mr. Andre Collins. Please recount the events truthfully and in order. Andre stood, his hands clasped together. His voice trembled slightly. On the night of March 15th, I was driving home from a hospital shift when 2 officers pulled me over. They said my tail light was out, but the mechanic confirmed the next morning it wasn't. When I asked why I was stopped, they said I had an attitude and dragged me out of the car. He paused, lowering his gaze. I didn't resist, Your Honor, but they still handcuffed me, pinned me against the hood, and claimed I was resisting arrest. I've never broken the law. I was just trying to go home. Across the room, Officers Carter Hale and Owen Pierce sat stiffly, faces tense. Diego watched them, noticing the flicker of unease in their eyes, the kind of tell he had seen countless times from men caught in their own lies. Andre's attorney, Gabriela Rivera, rose. Your Honor, we'd like to play a video recorded by a witness at the scene. The large screen lit up. Patrol lights flashed red and blue. Andre's voice rang out clearly. I'm not resisting. I just asked why I was stopped. The footage showed Carter slamming him onto the hood while Pierce locked the cuffs. There was no sign of aggression from Andre, only fear. A bystander's voice trembled off screen. Why are they doing this? He didn't do anything. Gasps spread through the room. Rivera froze the video on Andre's terrified face. Your Honor, this supports my client's statement completely. We also have a signed report confirming the car's taillights were functional. The reason for the stop was fabricated. Diego nodded. Noted. He turned toward the defense. Mr. Gordon, your response. Gordon stood, forcing calm. Your Honor, the video shows only a fraction of the incident. My clients received a tip about a suspect matching Mr. Collins's description. They acted to protect the public. Diego's tone sharpened. Was that tip recorded? Any time, location, or license number? Gordon hesitated. According to the internal, there wasn't. Diego cut in coldly. I reviewed the file. No such report exists. Would you like to correct your statement? Gordon shifted, voice tight. My clients acted according to training with no racial bias. Diego opened another folder. I have here 3 prior reports involving these same officers. Each identical male suspect, dark-skinned, wearing a hoodie, stopped for a minor issue, arrested for resisting. All 3 cases dismissed for lack of evidence. Do you see a pattern, Mr. Gordon A? Murmur swept through the gallery. Rivera stepped forward. Your Honor, the plaintiff calls our next witness, Mr. Aaron Patel, manager of the Northgate Fuel Mart. Patel, thin and weary, approached the stand. Your Honor, I know these officers. They often stopped by my station. The night Mr. Collins was arrested, they were here about an hour earlier. I have footage. The screen flickered again. Carter and Pierce stood by their patrol car, laughing. Carter's voice was clear. We need a few more stops to hit our quota. Pierce smirked. Southside's easy. Always someone who fits the description. The courtroom froze. Gordon jumped up. Objection. That footage hasn't been authenticated or submitted, Rivera replied sharply. Your Honor, this is newly discovered evidence provided by Mr. Patel this morning from his security drive. The court may admit it. Diego looked between them. The court allows it, Mr. Patel confirmed this footage was recorded by your cameras. Yes, Your Honor. No edits. Thank you. Diego's voice dropped low but resonant. This is not just evidence. It's a glimpse into how the system operates when no one is watching. The gallery was silent. Carter hung his head. Pierce's hands clenched as sweat soaked his collar. They both knew this was no longer about a single night. It was about the system itself. Diego's gaze swept the room. We are not judging two men today. We are confronting a machine that turned officers of the law into violators of it. Justice becomes real only when we dare to face the truth. The gavel struck. Court will recess for 15 minutes. But no one moved. Everyone knew that after what they had just witnessed, there would be no turning back. When the court reconvened, the air was still heavy with tension. Afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, cutting across the walls like thin blades. Judge Diego Morales returned to the bench, each step silencing the whispers. Court is now in session, he said, voice calm but commanding. The court calls Chief William Kerr to the stand. The side door opened, and Kerr entered in his immaculate uniform, his confidence cracking beneath a layer of unease. He had once boasted on television about Abington Precinct's record performance. Now that same phrase had brought him here under oath. Rivera stepped forward, sharp and precise. Chief Kerr, does your precinct evaluate officers based on the number of stops or arrests they make? Kerr hesitated. We don't call them quotas. We use the term activity metrics. Officers are encouraged to stay proactive. Proactive, how Chief Rivera pressed. By stopping those likely to commit crimes or just those who fit the description, Kerr's gaze darted toward the judge seeking rescue. But Diego's eyes offered no shelter, only silence and the weight of justice. Your Honor, Kerr said, voice dropping, we work off community reports. No one teaches officers to discriminate. Rivera's tone hardened. But have you ever reviewed how those reports are used, or how many minority drivers your officers stop compared to their population? That's handled by data analysts, Kerr said weakly. And those analysts report to you? Correct, Rivera continued. Your Honor, we'd like to present independent data compiled by journalist Elijah Brooks. The screen flickered on, displaying bar graphs of blue, red, and yellow. The title read, Traffic Stops by Race 6-Month Period. Black and brown drivers were stopped 5 times more often than white drivers under the same conditions, even after crime rates were adjusted. Murmurs swept the room. Diego tapped his gavel once. Order. Rivera took a step closer. Can you explain that Chief Kerr's forehead glistened? Statistics don't always reflect real conditions. There are other factors, like skin color. Rivera interrupted coldly. The silence that followed was deafening. Kerr looked down, defeated. Diego spoke next, his voice low but cutting. Chief Kerr, your February report commended Officers Hale and Pierce for exceeding arrest expectations? What exactly does that mean? It means their arrest numbers were above average, Kerr muttered. So detaining citizens even without charges counts as achievement. Technically, yes. Diego leaned forward slightly. And when wrongdoing is rewarded, Chief, what kind of officers do you think we create? Kerr couldn't answer. He stepped down, shoulders heavy the truth, finally pressing harder than pride. Defense Attorney Gordon stood quickly. Your Honor, I request an independent review. Statistics can be misleading. Diego nodded. We'll hear all perspectives, but justice doesn't falter because of numbers. It falters when we ignore what they reveal. Rivera called the next witness. Elijah Brooks, a young data journalist, walked to the stand carrying a laptop. Your Honor, he began. I analyzed 5 years of Abington's traffic data, even after controlling for factors like crime density and population. Minority drivers were 4.5 times more likely to be stopped. Over 70% of those stops led to no charges. That's not coincidence, it's a pattern. The gallery murmured again, softer this time, like a collective realization. Diego remained still, eyes distant. The numbers echoed what he had already known deep down since that rainy night. This wasn't just bias, it was design. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks," he said quietly. "The court acknowledges your findings. Today isn't only about who erred one night, it's about why that same night keeps repeating." From the gallery officer, Sophia Nguyen clasped her hands, her expression tight. She knew this moment marked more than exposure. It was the beginning of accountability. Diego struck the gavel. "Court will recess for 10 minutes. When we return, we'll hear from other Abington officers. This court won't just listen, it will understand." He rose, the light falling across his face, revealing not anger but a quiet sorrow, the look of a man who had just proven his greatest fear. True, that even justice, if left unchecked, can be taught to fail. When the gavel fell, silence filled the courtroom. No one moved. In the front row, officers Carter Hale and Owen Pierce sat rigid, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on the floor. Behind them, a few uniformed colleagues there to observe had lost all trace of confidence. Judge Diego Morales returned to the bench, a fresh file in his hand. He set it down and spoke evenly. "The court will continue. Officer Sophia Nguyen, please take the stand." The room went still. Sophia walked forward, small but composed. The light caught her uniform, giving her both strength and fragility. Diego gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. "Officer Nguyen," he began, his tone calm but firm. "How long have you served at the Abington precinct?" 14 months, Your Honor. "You were trained in traffic stops and identifying suspicious behavior, correct?" "Yes, sir." Attorney Rivera stepped forward. "Please describe that training." Sophia hesitated, fingers gripping the stand. "We were taught the concept of reasonable suspicion, but in the field, senior officers told us something else, that if someone doesn't look right, that's enough of a reason." Rivera's voice sharpened. "What does not look right mean?" Sophia took a deep breath. "It means people who don't seem to belong. A black man driving a new car in a rich area, a Latino walking in a white neighborhood, someone wearing a hoodie after dark. We were told those were signs of trouble." The room froze. Diego's voice lowered. "Did you think that was wrong?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said, trembling but steady. "I joined to protect fairness. But after watching so many stops happen because of skin color, I was afraid I'd become part of it." Hale leaned forward, snapping. "She's lying. No one trained her like that." Diego struck the gavel. "Order. Sit down, Officer Hale." Sophia looked at him, eyes glistening. "I wish you'd tell the truth, Hale." We all heard it. Rivera lifted a folder. "Your Honor, this morning we received an anonymous recording from inside the precinct." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. "Can you verify it?" Diego asked. "Yes, sir." The sender remains anonymous, but voice verification confirmed authenticity. The recording was made during a February meeting. Static filled the air, then a man's deep voice played through the speakers. "We need to keep our stop numbers high. The Latin and Black districts are easiest. Just write furtive movements or matched suspect description." Nobody checks. The gallery erupted in whispers. Diego's gaze hardened. "Officer Nguyen, do you recognize this voice?" Sophia hesitated, then looked toward Captain Kerr. Yes, Your Honor. It's Captain Kerr. The room exploded. Kerr stood, shouting. That's a lie. It's fake. Diego banged the gavel. Sit down, Captain. The file will be examined. Until proven otherwise, it stands as provisional evidence. Kerr slumped back, red-faced. Rivera continued. 3 other officers have come forward anonymously. They confirm pressure to increase stops in minority areas. Those who refused faced worse shifts or poor reviews. Diego nodded slowly. Their testimonies will be sealed. But one thing is clear, this is not just misconduct. It's a system built to reward it. Camera flashes burst across the room. Sophia's voice strengthened. I know speaking out could end my career, but I can't stay silent. I don't want another night like that. No one should be treated like Mr. Collins or like you, Judge Morales, just for the color of their skin. Applause rose from the back, despite the guards' shouts for silence. Diego didn't stop it. He looked at her eyes heavy with empathy. Thank you, Officer Nguyen, he said. Today you honored your oath to serve truth, not power. Tears welled as she stepped down. Diego turned toward the defendants. Pierce's head hung low. Hale's fists clenched. He knew what was happening, not an explosion, but a quiet collapse. Outside, rain began to fall again on the courthouse steps, soft but relentless. Another storm was coming. Yet this time no one was running from it. Rain streaked the courthouse windows as Judge Diego Morales returned to the bench. The air inside was sharp and cold, filled with the weight of something larger than a single case. Court is now in session. Diego said, his low voice steady. The court calls Officer Owen Pierce to the stand. Pierce stepped forward, pale and trembling, dark circles beneath his eyes. Since the recording had been released, he hadn't spoken a word. Now his voice cracked. Your Honor? I want to clarify a few things. Go ahead, Diego said. Pierce inhaled deeply, glancing toward Officer Sophia Nguyen, seated in the gallery. That night with Mr. Collins, we had no real reason to stop him. The suspect report didn't exist. We just wanted to meet our quota. I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth. Murmurs rippled through the room. Carter Hale turned red. Shut up, Pierce. You'll ruin us. Pierce didn't look back. I lied in the report. I said the suspect acted suspiciously, but all he did was ask why he was stopped. We were trained to do that. If there's no reason, create one. The courtroom fell still. Diego watched him silently, his face unreadable. Thank you, officer, he said quietly. The court acknowledges your statement. Hale suddenly stood, slamming his hand on the table. Enough. He's lying to save himself. No one forced him to do anything. Diego struck the gavel hard. Sit down, Officer Hale. But Hale's voice rose angry and desperate. You think being a cop is easy? One mistake can kill you. We question everyone to survive. And now because of a video. We're villains. He turned toward Diego, trembling with rage. And you, Judge Morales, you've hated me since that night. This is your revenge. Silence consumed the room. Diego met his eyes calm and unwavering. No, Officer Hale. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to prove that justice still exists, even for you. Hale froze, then slowly sat, his defiance gone. Rivera stepped forward. Your Honor, Officer Pierce has requested a private session to share additional information. We ask permission for a closed meeting. Diego nodded. Granted. Court will recess for 10 minutes. In a dim chamber behind the courtroom, Pierce sat on the edge of a chair, hands clasped, sweat beading on his forehead. Diego sat across from him. You said you had more to add, he prompted. Pierce nodded. It wasn't just that night. The whole precinct does it. We're told if we don't make enough stops, we lose bonuses or get moved to night shifts. So we look for easy targets. The easiest ones are people of color. They don't fight back and their complaints go nowhere. Diego said nothing, only listened. Pierce's voice cracked. That night when you said you were a judge, I didn't believe you. I laughed. The next morning I saw myself in that video. My son asked, Dad, why did they arrest that man? I couldn't answer. He looked up, eyes red. I was wrong. The system is wrong. If punishment will change it, I'll take it. Diego studied him. A part of him wanted to condemn, but another saw the truth, a man molded by fear and a broken culture. I respect your honesty, officer, but truth without action means nothing. When we return, say this publicly, not to save yourself, but to save what's left of trust. Pierce nodded. I will. When they returned, the gallery buzzed. Diego struck the gavel. Court is back in session. Officer Pierce, do you wish to add to your statement? Pierce straightened. Yes, Your Honor. We were trained to do this. I accept full responsibility, but I won't stay silent. I asked the court to investigate the entire Abington precinct. I'll cooperate even if it ends my career. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Hale sat frozen, his face ashen. Diego struck the gavel again. Order Officer Pierce's statement is entered into record. The court will proceed. He looked at both men, one finally facing truth, the other still clinging to pride. In his eyes was no victory, only a quiet ache. How many must fall before justice wakes? Outside, the rain continued washing the courthouse walls clean, the gold letters of King County Courthouse, glimmering faintly like justice itself, fragile but still alive. The afternoon faded into gray as the Seattle sun disappeared behind thick clouds. Outside the King County Courthouse, the square glowed with lights from cameras and news vans. Banners reading "Justice for All and End," racial profiling waved along the iron fences. The crowd had stood there since morning, waiting not just for a verdict, but to see if justice still meant something. Inside, the air buzzed with footsteps and murmurs. No police trial has ever drawn this much attention, a reporter whispered. In the courtroom, Judge Diego Morales sat still, turning through pages of notes. The case had grown far beyond what anyone expected, no longer a lawsuit, but a reckoning of the system itself. Fatigue pressed on him, but beneath it burned a small, steady hope. Court is back in session, he said, voice calm and deep. Attorney Rivera, your witness. Rivera rose confidently. Yes, Your Honor. We call data journalist Elijah Brooks. Elijah stepped forward, tablet in hand. I've analyzed 3 years of data from Abington Precinct. 72% of traffic stops targeted people of color, though they make up less than 20% of the population. More than half were accused of furtive movements, a term with no legal meaning, just an officer's feeling. We call it suspicion, but it's really fear. Diego nodded slowly, his gaze falling on Officers Carter Hale and Chief Kerr, both staring down at their desks. Rivera continued, These numbers don't show error. They show intent, a system built to repeat bias, and every repetition destroys trust. A murmur spread through the crowd. In the back, Officer Sofia Nguyen sat still, hands clenched tight. She knew that once truth entered the record, nothing would ever be the same. When Rivera finished, Diego called for a recess. In the hallway, gray light spilled across the walls. Camilla waited, her face caught between pride and fear. You're lighting a fire in a frozen sea, she whispered. They won't let you walk away from this. I know, Diego said softly. But if we don't light it, no one will ever see the way. She squeezed his hand. They're calling you a hero. He shook his head. I don't want to be a hero. I just don't want anyone handcuffed for fitting a description ever again. The bell rang, calling them back. The courtroom was packed. Now, reporters, students, citizens, all leaning forward in silence. The court will hear from the prosecution, Diego said. District Attorney Vega, proceed. Vega rose, her voice strong. Your Honor, after reviewing the evidence, the prosecutor's office is expanding the investigation. We will examine not only the actions of Officers Hale and Pierce, but also Abington's hiring, training, and oversight policies. If necessary, we will file criminal charges for falsified reports and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted. Kerr clenched his jaw. Hale froze, and Pierce lowered his head. Diego remained composed. He looked toward Sophia, whose quiet bravery had helped bring the truth forward. Thank you, Ms. Vega, he said. The court acknowledges your statement. When the court adjourned for the day, night had fallen. Cameras flashed as Diego stepped into the hall. A reporter shouted, Judge Morales, is this the turning point for police reform? Diego stopped, voice steady. No, this isn't a turning point. It's a beginning. Reform doesn't start with policy, it starts with truth. The next morning, clips from the trial spread across the country. Pierce's confession, Sophia's testimony, Diego's words. Justice still exists, even for those who fail. Hashtags, Justice for Collins and Morales' hearing filled every screen. In a Seattle cafe, a woman whispered, I never trusted courts before, but after hearing him, I feel hope. Across town, Abington Precinct was sealed off. Inside, Captain Kerr slammed the desk. Traitors in our ranks, he shouted. Younger officers said nothing. Some quietly emailed federal investigators. When Diego returned to court the next morning, the air felt different. Faces that once showed anger now held something gentler. Trust. Standing before them, he spoke calmly. Before closing arguments, I want to remind everyone justice is not revenge. It's a mirror. Only when we dare to look at it can we change. The room fell silent. Hale's head bowed. Kerr's hands shook. Sophia's eyes glistened. Diego's voice softened. Too many lives have been lost to prejudice. I don't want another. I only want courage. The courage to admit when we're wrong. He lifted the gavel. Court will continue. Justice will shine not through anger, but through truth. Outside, the rain had stopped. A beam of sunlight broke through the glass glowing across his desk. For a moment, no one moved. Everyone understood the real storm had just begun, not outside, but within. The next morning, clouds still hung over the spire of the King County Courthouse, pale light flooding through the tall windows. People arrived early, the air tense with expectation. Today, Judge Diego Morales would leave the bench to testify as a witness. The door opened, and an elegant Asian woman entered. King County Court Case, 214 now in session. Presiding Judge Lynn Tran. Her voice was clear and steady. Judge Morales will withdraw from his position to testify in the case concerning himself. Murmurs spread across the room. Diego stood removed his black robe and placed it on the rack. His face was calm. His eyes filled with resolve. Taking the witness seat, he swore to tell the truth. Rivera approached. Judge Morales, please describe the night you were arrested. Silence fell. That night, Diego began, I left the University of Washington Medical Center after my mother's surgery. It was raining. I stopped for gas at Northgate Fuel Mart. While closing the tank, officers Hale and Pierce approached and ordered me to put my hands on the car. I told them I was a judge and would show my ID. They didn't listen. They handcuffed me, pushed me against the hood. My face hit cold metal. I smelled gasoline and heard a woman shouting, "He didn't do anything," but they said I was resisting. I stayed silent, knowing one wrong word could cost me my life. He paused. I wasn't afraid for myself. I thought of my son. If one day he stopped like that, who would believe him? Rivera asked, "Were you allowed to call anyone?" No. Only when a young officer recognized me as a former instructor did they stop. Do you believe your position helped you? It's not belief, it's fact. If I weren't a judge, I'd just be another forgotten name. The room was silent. Rivera's voice softened. How did that change you? Diego's tone deepened. I used to believe the justice system was the safest home for reason. But that night I learned it only protects those seen through the right eyes. I don't hate them. I hate how fear became habit-taught and rewarded. A journalist wiped her eyes. Judge Tran watched him quietly. Then Attorney Gordon rose. "Judge Morales, with respect, could your position affect fairness here?" "Yes, there's pressure," Diego replied. "But truth doesn't bend for who holds the gavel." The questioning ended. Diego put on his robe again. The room fell silent. "I know the paradox of today," he said softly. "A man once a victim now passes judgment. But if justice belongs only to the unscarred, no one would be fit to serve it." Then Officer Hale stood. His face had lost its anger. "Your Honor," he said, voice low, "I was wrong. I never understood the fear of being stopped, only the fear of enforcing the law. But last night I watched the video. When we pulled you from the car, your eyes weren't angry. You were witnessing what you already knew was broken. Now I understand why you're here." Diego nodded. "Thank you, Officer Hale. Admitting wrong doesn't erase harm, but it begins repair. Justice must allow room for that repair." The gavel struck, echoing through the room. The fourth day of trial ended in deep silence. No one moved. They only watched the man once forced against a car in the rain, now seated at the center of justice, making the system face itself. Outside, the rain stopped. The last drops fell on the courthouse steps, scattering into light. Somewhere in the city, a child asked Dad what is justice, and the father replied, "It's when someone who's been wronged still chooses to do what's right." On the fifth morning, fog blanketed the square outside King County Courthouse. By 8 o'clock, hundreds stood waiting, holding signs, flags, and coffee cups. Their faces were weary, but hopeful. Inside the courtroom was silent, heavy with expectation. Judge Diego Morales sat tall. His black robe draped across his shoulders, calm yet solemn. He knew today's verdict would not just close a case, it would define what justice meant for this city. King County Court is now in session, the clerk announced. Attorney Rivera rose. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Andre Collins seeks not only compensation, but reform. We ask this court to examine not just the actions of Officers Hale and Pierce, but the system that shaped them, the training, the quotas, the silence that allowed injustice to thrive." A hush spread as Diego lifted his hand. "Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Before I deliver judgment, I must say this." He paused, eyes steady. "Justice is not a perfect scale. It tilts, depending on who holds it. For years, I believed my duty was to keep it balanced. But the night I was handcuffed, I realized some people were never placed on equal ground." The room fell still. "After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this court rules as follows." His voice deepened. Officers Carter Hale and Owen Pierce violated Mr. Collins's constitutional rights through unlawful arrest and excessive force. Both are suspended for 6 months without pay and must complete retraining in constitutional law, community relations, and bias awareness. Hale lowered his head. Pierce nodded faintly. "Second, Abington Precinct must reform within 90 days, install body cameras that cannot be disabled, create a community oversight board, remove arrest-based quotas, and publish quarterly public reports. These changes are not punishment. They are restoration. When citizens fear their protectors, it is no longer safety. It is moral failure. Murmurs rippled through the room. Third, a full review of 3 years of arrest data will begin immediately, focusing on cases labeled matching description or suspicious behavior. Any wrongful cases will be reopened. The district attorney's office under Marisol Vega will report quarterly to this court. Diego turned to Collins. The young man stood eyes wet. "Thank you, Your Honor, not just for me, but for everyone ever called suspicious." Diego shook his head gently. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself for speaking when silence was easier." He raised the gavel. "Regarding civil damages, Mr. Collins will receive full compensation. But the true outcome lies not in money, but in the knowledge that from now on, every officer in Abington will stand under the light of accountability." The gavel struck 3 times, echoing like thunder. The courtroom erupted, some clapping, others crying. Reporters flooded the hall. Sophia Nguyen stood still, tears glistening but smiling faintly. Hale leaned toward Pierce, whispering softly, before both bowed their heads. Captain Kerr sat rigid, fists clenched, a trace of regret flickering in his eyes. Diego removed his robe and placed the gavel down. Justice cannot exist without responsibility, and responsibility means nothing without change. Today we don't close a case, we open a chapter where the man once handcuffed in the rain returns not for revenge, but to restore balance. The room rose to its feet. As Diego opened the heavy doors, sunlight poured in, lighting his tired but resolute face. Outside, the crowd cheered. A little black girl on her father's shoulders held a sign. "Hi, thank you, Judge Morales." Diego smiled softly. In his eyes, the light was not victory, but hope, fragile, real, and radiant, like the first clear sky after a long storm. 6 months later, the summer sun bathed Seattle in gold, its light reflecting off glass towers and dancing across the rippling surface of Green Lake. Inside the Shoreline Community Center, the main hall was packed. On stage hung a banner, Police Oversight Commission Report, 6 months of Abington Reform. Judge Diego Morales stood before a row of microphones, gray suit pressed silver streaks in his hair, his voice steady and calm. Before him sat police officers, residents, reporters, and former victims of unjust stops. The air was different now. Quiet, expectant, no longer tense. 6 months ago, Diego began. We had one trial, one case, one small crack in a massive wall. But through that crack, light entered. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Today I can share real results. Random stops are down 40%. Complaints have been cut nearly in half. Over 80% of citizens now say they feel safer seeing police patrols. Violent crime, down 3%. When people are treated with dignity, society protects itself. Applause filled the hall. This isn't a victory, Diego continued. It's a reminder of what respect can build. In the front row, Sophia Nguyen, now head of the new Community Relations Division, smiled when Diego mentioned young officers who spoke the truth while others stayed silent. A few seats away, Owen Pierce sat quietly. After suspension and retraining, he had returned as an internal instructor, teaching civilian interaction. When Diego spoke of those who once erred but had the courage to face the truth, Owen lowered his head, eyes glistening. At the back sat Carter Hale, no longer in uniform, his expression humble. When Diego stepped off stage, their eyes met. Carter stood, extended a hand. Diego clasped it firmly. No words were needed, only a nod between two men who had once stood on opposite sides, now meeting in the middle. After the ceremony, Diego walked down a hallway lined with photos, town meetings, police workshops, youth programs. One picture made him stop the Northgate Fuel Mart where everything began. Beneath it, a bronze plaque read, "At this place, a mistake sparked change. Justice begins not in courts, but in the moment someone dares to say, 'Enough.'" Arun Patel. The gas station owner appeared beside him, smiling. Judge Morales people stop by every day to see that plaque. They don't see this place as dark anymore. Diego smiled gently, because now it carries light. That evening, he drove through rain-slick streets. At a stoplight, he noticed a young black man in a hoodie beside a stalled car. A patrol car pulled over. Diego held his breath, but then he saw the officer take off his raincoat, kneel to help check the engine. Soon, the car roared to life. The two men laughed, shook hands, and parted with a wave. Diego exhaled a quiet warmth rising in his chest, a fragile but steady belief that real change begins with one person brave enough to say no. Later that night, he returned home. Camilla was reading case files while Mateo and Isabella argued playfully over who could keep his old hoodie, the same one he wore that rainy night. Diego laughed softly. "Another committee meeting tomorrow?" Camilla asked. "Yes," he said, pouring tea. "We're adding students and immigrant representatives. They want a civic rights program for high schools. It's time." Camilla smiled, eyes proud. "You turned your story into a classroom?" "No," Diego replied. "I just tell it so they never have to live it." Later, he sat on the porch as a cool breeze drifted in from the lake. His phone buzzed. A video titled, "From Handcuffs to Hope" was trending again, filled with thousands of stories of fear, resilience, and belief that things could change. Diego set the phone down and looked up. The Seattle sky, rarely clear, shimmered with stars. He breathed deeply. The words he once spoke in court echoed softly in his mind. Justice cannot exist without accountability, but it cannot survive without hope. He smiled and went inside. As the door closed, a narrator's voice rose warm and calm. "This story doesn't end here. Each of us holds a piece of the scale. Keep sharing and believing, because justice lives only when we still believe in it."